Now, once we have carried all of that urine filtrate down here, down through the ureters, through the posterior of the bladder, we're going to find, well, the bladder. Now, the bladder has four main tissue layers on the inside. We can see we have adventitia on the outside. Then we have this set of muscles here, collectively called the detrusor muscle. Okay. Now, this muscle, as the bladder fills, is basically going to get stretched. And as that's going to get stretched, that's what's going to be sending the signals to our brain to say, hey, we may need to go to the restroom. It's all going to be based off of how much stretch is there. Smaller amounts of liquid, so something like, say, 100 milliliters, it's not going to be putting any stretch on this. So it's actually just going to continue what we might call the storage reflex, to where it's just going to kind of hold onto the fluid that's there. It's like, hey, we're fine. Just keep sending fluid in. Okay. Now, this is a muscle, though, so it can constrict whenever it is time to empty the bladder. This muscle will then allow us to kind of constrict, press on that fluid, and press it out. Okay. Now, as we move up, we have the submucosa, and then you see this really, really thick layer of mucosa. It's got these big folds. Now, we can also see these big folds here, looking at it from kind of the macroscopic view. These large folds are what we're going to call the mucosal folds. Well, these folds should look pretty similar to, say, the gastric folds did in the stomach, where we have this big, thick layer of tissue here that allows this muscle to expand, or allow the organ to expand. So it's going to allow it to stretch out a bit. Why might it stretch out? Well, because there's a lot of extra fluid in there. So say you had a big, large cup of coffee or something like that, which is larger than just a small, it's larger than 100 milliliters. As that fluid gets down here, well, as we get more and more and more fluid in here, we need more and more stretch. So not only are we going to be putting some stress on the muscle and make that muscle stretch, instead we're also going to be placing some stretch on the mucosal lining as well. So this epithelial tissue has to be able to expand as the bladder is filling. Because of this, it's going to be composed of what we call transitional epithelium. This is, remember, where the cells looked a little different as we move closer and closer to the surface. So as we stretch things out, the cells have to be able to kind of change shape. So there's no real definite shape to the cells themselves. Okay. Now, we do have openings, of course, at the back for where those ureters come in. And we're going to kind of move down this little funnel, what we might call the trogony. Okay. And that's going to reach down here to the neck of the urinary bladder, which finally leads us to the internal urethral sphincter. Internal sphincter means this is the one that's actually at the opening of the bladder. Now, eventually, once we get a bunch of fluid in here, so once we kind of reach the 200 to 300 milliliter mark, and we start to send signals to the brain that says, hey, it is time to go to the bathroom. Whenever that happens, we're actually going to send some signals down here to that internal urethral sphincter to tell it to relax. When you tell that sphincter to relax, it's going to release some fluid down here into the urethra. So this is going to be the pathway out for the fluid. Okay. That will then reach our external urethral sphincter. This is the muscle that you're actually going to be relaxing when you actually try to go to the restroom. So when you try and evacuate your bladder, what we might call micturition. Okay. So what you're going to be doing there is you're basically going to relax this sphincter here. When that happens, you'll release the flow, and that will allow the fluid to leave out from the bladder and leave out through the urethra to the outside environment. Okay. Now, say you get a couple 100 milliliters of liquid in here, then you're like, I don't really need to go to the restroom right now because I've got other things I'm trying to do. Eventually, when that happens, the muscles will be like, okay, we don't need to evacuate the bladder yet, even though there is some stretch. So it will stop sending the signal to the brain that says, hey, it's time to go to the restroom. So we might call this an extension of that sort of storage reflex, where it's like, okay, we are receiving some signal, but let's kind of hold off a little bit. Okay. But eventually there will be so much liquid in here that it will be time to go regardless. That line tends to be around the 600 milliliter mark. Okay. At which point it will send the signal, says, hey, it is time to go to the bathroom, and you're going to go to the bathroom now, whether you really kind of like it or not. At which point internal sphincter relaxes, and we're going to start pushing fluid down towards the external urethral sphincter, which then you would need to release to let it go. Now, eventually, if so much fluid builds up in here, it's actually going to inhibit the amount or ability of additional fluid from the ureters to enter the bladder, which means you're going to get some kind of fluid buildup into the ureters as well. So if you've ever been on like a long car ride where you've had a bunch of liquid ahead of time, what'll happen is what happens is, like, eventually it gets to the point where it almost hurts. You have to go to the bathroom so bad. So then all of a sudden you go to the bathroom. Well, you go to the bathroom, you get rid of all the liquid that's here in the bladder, but Problem is that we had a bunch of liquid now backed up in the ureters. So what happens after you go to the bathroom after drinking that Route 44? All of a sudden you have to go to the bathroom pretty much immediately after. Why? That's just because of all the fluid that's built back up here into the ureters. Now here we have a good picture of the transitional epithelium. So you can see the nuclei are really close together here near the basement membrane, but as we get to the lumen of the bladder, you can see they kind of stretch out into this kind of oddly shaped cells. You can also see these mucosal folds here. So as we can stretch, these mucosal folds would flatten out, and eventually the transitional epithelium would kind of flatten out too as everything gets stretched. Now, importantly, though, there are some differences between the male and female urethra. The female urethra, we have just inside the perineum here. So here's where we have our external urethral sphincter that will then leave out through the external urethral orifice, which is between the labial folds. Okay. So it basically goes straight out, and we have a kind of one usage kind of muscular tube here. It's quite short. Okay. So the pathway from bladder to the outside environment is fairly small. That is not quite the case for the male urethra. For the male urethra, the urethra gets routed through the prostate gland, as well as past a couple of bulbourethral glands, at which point it then goes through what we call the spongy urethra, because it's going to be going through some spongy erectile tissue in the penis. So because of this, the pathway is a little bit more convoluted. One of the reasons for this is because the male urethra is also going to be used for semen. So it's going to contain sperm and seminal fluid and all those things as well. So we have to have places for those substances to enter the urethra, and they're going to be entering through things like the prostate gland. Bulbourethral glands would then secrete theirs into the spongy urethra as well. So because of that, we have some differences there. Now, one of the other differences that occurs here is also due to the length of the urethra. The male urethra is going to, because of its length, it's going to have its external urethral orifice further away from the anal canal. So that means we're going to have fewer bacteria and fewer yeasts and fungi and things like that that actually have access to the inside of the male urethra because of the distance from the digestive system, which means males are less likely to get something like a urinary tract infection than something like a female, where the distance is fairly short and the proximity to the anal canal is actually a little closer together, which means they're going to be more likely, females are going to be more likely to have urinary tract infections than someone like a male.